So how would you feel about visiting Florida? It's got a lot going for it with its amazing beaches, its world-class theme parks like Disney World, Epcot, and Universal. And don't forget the nightlife. But now Florida is being called out by the NAACP. They issued a travel warning for the state, saying, quote, Florida is openly hostile towards African Americans, people of color, and LGBTQ plus individuals. It's not just the NAACP. Other minority groups, including the League of United Latin American Citizens and Equality Florida, have also issued travel warnings. So what do you think of this? And will this make a dent in the 138 million tourists who visit each year? Is it dangerous there for some people, or is this just political? Al, what do you think? And also, you used to live in Florida.
Right. I lived in Florida 10 years. And, I understand the point of the NAACP issuing this. I understand the League of Latin American Citizens issuing this. I believe that's to raise political awareness for what's going on down there. But in terms of the day-to-day, the everyday man, for anybody that's going down there, Florida's a peninsula. It's all beach. People are going to go to the beach. It's fairly low cost, it's accessible, and people have some tradition to going there, and they have loose drinking laws. People are going to go to Florida, but this is going to raise awareness. And I think when we start getting into bans and things like that, a couple sit-ins if the Miami Heat don't take the court, if the Florida Gators don't take the court or take the field, that's when we'll start to see some change on a political level, because now you're messing with real money. But as an individual, people are not going to make that sacrifice if they've been saving up for 2 years to do this vacation.
Well, I think the catalyst to the need for an advisory is definitely political, because political's made covert overt. Now we're just saying the quiet things out loud on both sides. It is important that these organizations speak up in this way, because it's about not only the advancement but also the protection of the demographics in which they represent. If no one was to say anything or to sound an alarm on what is open discrimination, what is costing lives, whether they're being taken themselves or they're being put in situations that other people feel more emboldened, that their lives don't have as much value. These are conversations that need to be had on this side to tell people, like, hey, you might want to consider this. On the other side of this, I've seen a lot of people who are Floridians who have taken to social media to say, now we're likening this to like the Titanic, where the women and children and people with money are able to relocate, but that doesn't mean that that's what our reality is. So whether they feel that what's happening in Florida politically is correct or not, they still are going to suffer the consequences. I don't know if this is going to cause anyone to cancel their trip to Miami, but I do think that it catalyzes a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's not, irresponsible is not the word, but neither is travel advisory. That means, like, you should not go to this country. You should not go here because there's air pollution. Whatever it may be. This is a little extreme. Maybe that's the word I should use. It's extreme to use this term, because none of that's going on. You could say that about Chicago, the west side of Chicago. There's murders there all the time. It's irresponsible to say do not go to Chicago, because there's different parts and it's happening in one part of the city.
Well, not one part. And I'm from the west side of Chicago, so you know how I feel about that.
Yeah, well, it's irresponsible to say don't go to Chicago for tourism because of what's happening in Chicago. Would you agree with that?
Well, okay, to finish your, I just want to say, because I think that we throw out Chicago a lot, but in terms of per capita and when it comes to random acts of violence in terms of tourism, which is what we're speaking of,
right,
Chicago doesn't rank in the top 10. So I just want to be fair about that, because I think that's important for people to know. Also, there's advisories in other countries telling their citizens not to visit the United States.
Right, but I'm just saying for the whole state of Florida, what I'm saying is, this boils down to politics. They don't like what they're doing in some political aspect, so they're taking advantage of the whole state, saying you shouldn't come here. I'm sure there's LGBTQ parts of Florida that people rely on travel, and they come there for travel. To say don't come here, there's a travel advisory, is irresponsible to all the other communities. I'm sure there's black communities. I'm sure there's LGBTQ. I'm sure there's Latin. Have you been to Miami? To say don't come here because of my political thinking or ideology, to me, isn't a great message. You say those things when there's a real advisory. Don't come here. You want to go to the Middle East? You want to go to Palestine? You want to do these different things if you're in different countries? That's a travel advisory. Because of politics, to say I'm putting out a travel advisory, to me,
it's extreme.
It's a little extreme.
I hear what you're saying. You don't want to politicize
politicize travel advisories, right? Because then you're the boy calling wolf, and you never crying wolf. You never know when it's real. However, this is when I get kind of really into it. This is when politics and real life mix. So you're right. They did politicize a travel advisory, but they did it because of real life happening. So if I'm a gay teenager, I might not want to go to Florida for giving my money, right? So they spend $101 billion a year. I might not want to do that. I might not feel fully safe knowing they're hyper focused on me and my marginalized community. And I also might not want to go because I feel like that state doesn't include me in the ways in their legislation that the rest of the United States does. Do I think it'll stop people from going to Miami who are like 20? No. But we looked on the chat, and this morning 2 people wrote, we just changed our plans due to Desantis' legislation. It's not going to be a lot, but politics here is lifestyle here. They mesh here. That's when a gay person feels that their life is in danger because of politics.
I wouldn't want to go to Florida, I'll be honest. And, you can say what you want, but number one, the fact that they have open permitless carry would not make me feel comfortable. Number 2, as an ally to Black and brown communities and LGBTQIA communities, I really do read accounts of people who have visited Florida, live in Florida, and it breaks my heart to see that these people feel erased. They don't feel seen. They don't feel heard.
They don't feel safe.
They don't feel safe. If something were to happen to them, would they really get justice?
Well,
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, don't apologize for having the empathy for people that are the minority in a situation and being marginalized. I think when everybody's talking, I feel like it's incumbent upon me to speak for the people that live in Florida. I talk to my best friend every day. I live down there, and there's a different culture, almost the way there's a different culture around people that live in New Orleans. It's different. We're all citizens, but there's a different vibe. And a lot of the culture in Florida that no one really wants to talk about is counterculture. They fought back against mask mandates. You can still smoke in bars in certain places. There is a kind of outlaw kind of lifestyle that attracts certain people to Florida, and a lot of them are proud of where they live. And so the idea that Florida is under this attack, I think, is realistic in a lot of situations, but there is a pride and I'm only speaking for South Florida, there's a pride in that state and in that kind of lower third where it's kind of us against the world.
Is South Beach in that area?
Yeah, South Beach is in that area.
Typically
but
really
also I'm talking about Orlando, I'm talking about Gainesville. There's a thing where everybody kind of makes fun of Florida. It's this part of the United States. And how long before you keep getting attacked, before you start circling, your, I don't want to say wagons, I don't know if that's a racist term now, but it's a very us against you guys mentality down in Florida. So it's not as much in terms of in-state fighting as you would think.
But here, listen, I traveled a lot in my life, and I learned so much from my travels. And there was a lot of places where people said, you probably shouldn't go here. And I went there, whatever it may be. And I learned a lot. And the people that they're saying, this is what's going to happen if you go here. And it didn't, and the people were wonderful. That's what I don't like what's happening in Florida. Don't go to Florida because all of Florida is bad, because you don't like Desantis or a couple policies that got passed. Not everybody in Florida acts like that. Not everybody in the Middle East is like that.
I'm not saying everybody acts like that.
But that's what we're getting to a point where it's a very slippery slope by saying, don't come here. It's by telling people from the South, don't go to New York or vice versa. There's the Mason-Dixon line. You're not supposed to cross it?
Totally.
That's ridiculous.
I agree with you, but both can be true. For instance, other countries warning their citizens to come here, which Erica pointed out because of the gun violence, that is true, and that's horrific, but I also have great pride in my country. I can say, wow, we really need to work on that. I literally go door to door, and I'm working on that myself. So I do have pride in my country, but I can also point out what's wrong. Same with Floridians. I can say, I have cousins that live in Florida. Great, I'm glad that you're happy. I wouldn't feel comfortable. I would not feel comfortable going there considering what type of legislation is being passed left and right, not only on the gun control front, but also on the front of marginalized communities. I would not feel good putting my money into that state.
But so LA is very democratic. What if Donald Trump said, don't go to Los Angeles because of the politics there? They don't agree with mine.
But it's not saying because of the politics.
That would be ridiculous to say.
But that's not what they're saying, though. That's not a fair comparison, because DeSantis is passing real legislation that is harming people. So to just say,
but so everyone in Florida agrees by that?
No,
that's not true.
No, but the laws are universal in Florida. She's saying the laws are fully federally in Florida, they're going to be passed not in just some parts of Florida.
I was asked a specific question and I just answered it. Like, I probably wouldn't go online and publicize that to the world, but when I'm asked a question, I'm going to answer it honestly.